hour of Jupiter, Anu, VV, VVV, Sol 21 degrees Leo, Luna 12 degrees Aquarius, Dies Mercure, August 14, 2019, Volga, begun 8:46 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Do what thy wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Liber al vel leges, Roman numeral 2, verse 36. There are rituals of the elements and feasts of the times. These are randomly drawn, seemingly, there's no random, from a program I have of Liber al vel leges, delivered to Aleister Crowley in 1904. And his wife, Rose Kelly. And so they come up as they do, divinely, we assume. Returning to Hargrove Jennings, and what I'm translating as the Attaria Rosicruce, Rites and Mysteries. Attaria, an attar, is a pharmacist or a perfume maker, and they often crush roses or flowers in the process of making that perfume. However, Mr. Jennings offers another explanation of the word. So there are many. Chapter the 5th. The sigil above chapter the 5th is a sans serif T with a ring above it, and it's titled Egyptian Crux. An historical adventure. But to return to Signor Garibaldi, from whom we have notwithstanding made no impertinent digression, since he was eventually suspected to be one of the strange people, or Rosicrucians, or ever-livers, of whom we are treating. This was from mysterious circumstances which occurred afterwards in relation to him, and which are in print. The Venetian nobleman was now on a footing of sufficient intimacy with Signor Garibaldi to say to him one evening at his own house that he understood that he had a fine collection of pictures, and that, if agreeable, he would pay him a visit some day for the purpose of viewing them. The nobleman's daughter, who was present and who was pensively looking down upon the table, more than half in love with the stranger, as she had become, thinking deeply of something that the Signor had just said, or Signor had just said, raised her eyes eagerly at this expression of wish by her father, and, as accorded with her feelings, she appeared, though she spoke not, to be greatly desirous to make one of the party to see the pictures. It was natural that she should secretly rejoice at this opportunity of becoming more intimately acquainted with the domestic life of one whom she had grown to regard with feelings of such powerful interest. She felt that the mere fact of being his guest and under the roof which was his would seem to bring her nearer to him, and, as common with lovers, it appeared to her that their being thus together would, in feeling at least, appear to identify both. Signor Garibaldi was very polite, and readily invited the nobleman to his house, and also extended the invitation to the young lady. should she feel disposed to accompany her father, since he divined from the expression of her face that she was wishful to that effect. The day for the visit was then named, and the Signor took his departure with the expressions of friendship on all sides which usually ended their pleasant meetings. It followed from this arrangement that on the day appointed the father and daughter went to Signor Gualdi's house. They were received by the Signor with warm kindness, and were shown over his rooms with every mark of friendliness and distinction. The nobleman viewed Signor Gualdi's pictures with great attention, and when he had completed his tour of the gallery, he expressed his satisfaction by telling the Signor that he had never seen a finer collection, considering the number of pieces. They were now in Signor Gualdi's own chamber, the last of his set of rooms, and they were just on the point of turning to go out, bidding adieu, and Gualdi was courteously removing the tapestry from below the door to widen the egress, when the nobleman, who had paused to allow him thus to clear the way, by chance cast his eyes upward over the door, where there hung a picture with the curtain accidentally withdrawn, evidently of the stranger himself. The Venetian looked upon it with doubt, and after a while his face fell, but it soon cleared, as if with relief. The gaze of the daughter was also now riveted upon the picture, which was very like Gualdi, but she regarded it with a look of tenderness and a blush. The Venetian looked from the picture to Gualdi, and back again from Gualdi to the picture. It was some time before he spoke, and when he did, his voice sounded strangely. "That picture was intended for you, sir," said he at last, hesitating, to Signor Gualdi. A slight cold change passed over the eyes of the stranger, but he only made reply by a low bow. "You look a moderately young man, to be candid with you, sir. I should say about 45 or thereabouts. And yet I know, by certain means of which I will not now further speak, that this picture is by the hand of Titian, who has been dead nearly a couple 100 years. How is this possible?" He added, with a polite, grave smile, "It is not easy," said Signor Gualdi quietly, "to know all the things that are possible or not possible, for very frequently mistakes are made concerning such. But there is certainly nothing strange in my being like a portrait painted by Titian." The nobleman easily perceived by his manner, and by a momentary cloud upon his brow, that the stranger felt offence. The daughter clung to her father's arm, secretly afraid that this little unexpected demur might pass into coolness, and end with a consummation of estrangement, which she feared excessively. She dreaded nervously the rupture of their intimacy with the stranger, and, contradictory as it may seem, she wanted to withdraw. Even without the demur, she dreaded being cleared up into renewed pleasant confidence. However, this little temporary misunderstanding was soon put an end to by Signor Gualdi himself, who in a moment or two resumed his ordinary manner, and he saw the father and daughter downstairs and forth to the entrance of his house, with his usual composed politeness, though the nobleman could not help some feeling of restraint, and his daughter experienced a considerable amount of mortification, and she could not look at Signor Gualdi, or rather, when she did, she dwelt on his face too much. This little occurrence remained as a puzzle in the mind of the nobleman. His daughter felt lonely and dissatisfied afterwards, eager for the restoration of the same friendly feeling from Signor Gualdi, and revolving in her mind, with the ingenuity of love, numberless schemes to achieve it. The Venetian betook himself in the evening to the usual coffee-house, and he could not forbear speaking of the incident among the group of people collected there. Their curiosity was roused, and one or two resolved to satisfy themselves by looking at the picture attentively the next morning. But to obtain an opportunity to see the picture on this next morning, it was necessary to see the Signor Gualdi somewhere, and to have the invitation of so reserved a man to his lodgings for the purpose. The only likely place to meet with him was at the coffee-house, and thither the gentleman went at the usual time, hoping, as it was the Signor's habit to present himself, that he would do so. But he did not come, nor had he been heard of from the time of the visit of the nobleman the day before to the Signor's house, which absence, for the first time almost that he had been seen in Venice, surprised everybody. But as they did not meet with him at the coffee-house, as they thought was sure, one of the persons who had the oftenest conversed with the Signor, and therefore was the freer in his acquaintance, undertook to go to his lodgings and inquire after him, which he did. But he was answered by the owner of the house, who came to the street door to respond to the questioner, that the Signor had gone, having quitted Venice that morning early, and that he had locked up his pictures with certain orders, and had taken the key of his rooms with him. This affair made a great noise at the time in Venice, and an account of it found its way into most of the newspapers of the year in which it occurred. In these newspapers, and elsewhere, an outline of the foregoing particulars may be seen. The account of the Signor Gualdi will also be met with in Les Mémoires Historiques from the year 1687, tome 1, page 365. The chief particulars of our own narrative are extracted from an old book in our collection treating of well-attested relations of the sages, and of life protracted by their art for several centuries. Hermipus Redivivus, or the Sage's Triumph over Old Age and the Grave, London, 2nd edition, much enlarged, printed for J. Nourse at the Lamb against Catherine Street in the Strand in the year 1749. And thus much for the history of the Signor Gualdi, who was suspected to be a Rosicrucian. We shall have further interesting notices of these unaccountable people as we proceed. The engraving after chapter the 5th is called the Egyptian Eve trampling the dragon. It is of a woman fully naked, standing upon a sturgeon fish, holding in one hand, her right, a flower or a lily, and in her left, a crab. Upon her head is another face, and her hair is in the shape of an omega, the non-W type. Behind the fish, or maybe impelling it, are two rods, as tall as she is. One has two Egyptian feathers pointed opposite each other, as in hieroglyphs, and at the tip of the sphere is a circle. The other is topped by a diamond or other jewel, and above the diamond is a partridge, or possibly a very fancy owl, stylized. Chapter the 6th is headed by the Lebarum, which looks very similar to the sigil of a minority group within the land of historical Palestine, Roman Palestine, or today's Judea, Samaria, which is called Israel. It is an X, which seems to be in the background, the way you would start a campfire, and a typed P, again, sans serif, that extends from the middle of the X straight up, as if in front of it, and on the large part of the P, the extended part, which itself looks like a D, on the left, as you're looking at it, there is an X, and on the right there is a P that is more drawn with a pencil or pen than printed or typed. This is again called the Labarum, Labarum. The Hermetic Brethren. The following passages occur in a letter published by some anonymous members of the RC, and are adduced in a translation from the Latin by one of the most famous men of the order, who addressed from the University of Oxford about the period of Oliver Cromwell, to which university the great English Rosicrucian Robertus de Fluctibus, Robert Flood, also belonged, in the time of James I and Charles I. We have made repeated visits to the church where Robert Flood lies buried, hymn and which are in print. Every man naturally desires superiority. Men wish for treasures and to seem great in the eyes of the world. God indeed created all things to the end that man might give him thanks. But there is no individual thanks of his proper duties. He secretly desires to spend his days idly, and would enjoy riches and pleasures without any previous labor or danger. When we, professors of abstruse sciences, speak, men either revile or contemn. They either envy or laugh. When we discourse of gold, they assume that we would assuredly produce it if we could, because they judge us by themselves. And when we debate of it and enlarge upon it, they imagine we shall finish by teaching them how to make gold by art, or furnish them with it already made. And wherefore or why should we teach them the way to these mighty possessions? Shall it be to the end that men may live pompously in the eyes of the world, swagger and make wars, be violent when they are contradicted, turn usurers, gluttons, and drunkards, abandon themselves to lust? Now, all these things deface and defile men, and the holy temple of man's body are plainly against the ordinances of God. For this dream of the world, as also the body or vehicle through which it is made manifest, the Lord intended to be pure. It was not supposed in the divine arrangement that men should grow again down to the earth. It is for other purposes that the stars, in their attraction, have raised man on his feet instead of abandoning him to the all fours. That were the imperfect tentatives of nature until life, through the supernatural impulse, rose above its original condemned level, base and relegate. We of the secret knowledge do wrap ourselves in mystery, to avoid the objurgation and importunity of violence of those who conceive that we cannot be philosophers unless we put our knowledge to some ordinary worldly use. There is scarcely one who thinks about us who does not believe that our society has no existence. Because, as he truly declares, he never met any of us, and he concludes that there is no such brotherhood because, in his vanity, we seek not him to be our fellow. We do not come, as he assuredly expects, to the conspicuous stage upon which, like himself, as he desires the gaze of the vulgar, every fool may enter, winning wonder. If the man's appetite be that empty way, and way he has obtained it, and when he has obtained it, crying out, Lo, this is also vanity. Dr. Edmund Dickinson, physician to King Charles II, a professed seeker of the Hermetic knowledge, produced a book entitled De Quinta Essentia Philosophorum, which was printed at Oxford in 1686, and a second time in 1705. There was a third edition of it printed in Germany in 1721. In correspondence with a French adept, the latter explained the reasons why the Brothers of the Rosy Cross concealed themselves. As to the universal medicine, elixir vitae, or vitse, or vitje, or potable form of the preternatural menstruum, he positively asserts that it is in the hands of the illuminated, but that, by the time they discover it, they have ceased to desire its uses, being far above them, and as to life for centuries, being wishful for other things, they decline availing themselves of it. He adds that the adepts are obliged to conceal themselves for the sake of safety, because they would be abandoned in the consolations of the intercourse of this world, if they were not indeed exposed to worse risks. Supposing that their gifts were proven to the conviction of the bystanders as more than human, when they would become simply intolerable and abhorrent. Thus, there are excellent reasons for their conduct. They proceed with the utmost caution, and instead of making a display of their powers, as vainglory is the least distinguishing characteristic of these great men, they studiously evade the idea that they possess an extraordinary or separate knowledge. They live simply as mere spectators in the world, and they desire to make no disciples, converts, nor confidants. They submit to the obligations of life and to relationships, enjoying the fellowship of none, admiring none, following none but themselves. They obey all codes, are excellent citizens, and only preserve silence in regard to their own private convictions, giving the world the benefit of their acquirements up to a certain point, seeking only sympathy at some angles of their multiform character, but shutting out curiosity wholly, where they do not wish its imperative eyes. This is the reason that the Rosicrucians pass through the world mostly unnoticed, and that people generally disbelieve that there ever were such persons, or believe that, if there were, their pretensions are an imposition. It is easy to discredit things which we do not understand. In fact, nature compels us to reject all propositions which do not consist with our reason. The true artist is supposed to avoid all suspicion, even on the part of those nearest to him. And granting the possibility of the Rosicrucian means of the renewal of life, and supposing also that it was the desire of the Hermetic philosopher, it would not be difficult for him so to order his arrangements as that he should seem to die in one place, to keep up the character of the natural manner of his life, by withdrawing himself to reappear in another place as a new person at the time that seemed most convenient to him for the purpose. For everything and every difficult thing is easy to those with money, nor will the world inquire with too resolute a curiosity if you have coolness and address, and if you have the art of accounting for things. The man of this order also is solus, and without wife or children to embarrass him in the private disposition of his affairs, or to follow him too closely into his by-corners. Thus it will be seen that philosophers may live in the world, and have all these gifts, and yet be never heard of, or, if heard of, only as they themselves wish or suggest. As an instance of the unexpected risk which a member of this order may run if he turns his attention to the practical side of his studies, spite of all his precautions, we may cite the accident which happened to a famous Englishman who disguised himself under the name of Eugenius Philalethes, but whose real name is said to be Thomas Vaughan. He tells us of himself that going to a goldsmith to sell 1,200 marks worth of gold, the man told him at first sight that it never came out of the mines, but was the production of art, as it was not of the standard of any known kingdom. Which proved so sudden a dilemma to offerer of the gold that he withdrew immediately, leaving it behind him. It naturally follows from this that it is not only necessary to have gold, but that gold shall be marketable or acceptable gold, as otherwise it is utterly useless for the purposes of conversion into money in this world. Thomas Vaughan, who was a scholar of Oxford, and was vehemently attacked in his lifetime, and who certainly was a Rosicrucian adept, if there ever was one, led a wandering life, and fell often into great perplexities and dangers from the mere suspicion that he possessed extraordinary secrets. He was born, as we learn from his writings, about the year 1612, which makes him a contemporary of the great English Rosicrucian Robert Fludd. And what is the strangest part of his history, as we find remarked by a writer in 1749, is that he is believed by those of his fraternity, so the author adds, to be living even now, and a person of great credit at Nuremberg, in Germany, affirms that he conversed with him but a year or two ago. Nay, it is further asserted, continues the author, that this very individual is the president of the illuminated in Europe, in that he sits as such in all their annual meetings. Thomas Vaughan, according to the report of the philosopher Robert Boyle, and of others who knew him, was a man of remarkable piety and of unstained morals. He has written and edited several invaluable works upon the secrets of the philosophers, some of which are in our possession. Among others, Introitus apertus ad oculusum reges palatium, Lumen de Lumine, Magia Adamica, Amena Magica Abscondita, and other learned books, advancing very peculiar theories concerning the unseen and the seen. These books were disbelieved at the time and remain discredited, principally because they treat of eccentric and seemingly impossible things. It is, however, certain that we go but a very little way out of the usual learned track before we encounter puzzling matters, which may well set us investigating our knowledge and looking with some suspicion upon its grounds, spite of all the pompous claims of modern philosophers, who are continually, on account of their conceitedness, making sad mistakes and breaking down with their plausible systems. Progress and enlightenment are prerogatives to which no generation in particular can lay a special claim, says a modern writer, speaking of railways and their inventions. Intelligence like that of the Stephensons is born again and again, at lengthened intervals, and it is only these giants in wisdom who know how to carry on to perfection the knowledge which centuries have been piling up before them. But the age in which such men are cast is often unequal to appreciate the genius which seeks to elevate its aspiration. Thus it was in 1820 that Mr. William Brougham proposed to consign George Stephenson to Bedlam for being the greatest benefactor of his time. But now that we have adopted somewhat fully his rejected ideas of steam locomotion and high rates of speed, which were with so much difficulty forced upon us, we complacently call ourselves enlightened, and doubtless we are tolerably safe in doing so, considering the Stephensons and similar scientific visionaries no longer live to contradict us. We might add that the Rosicrucians hold their critics in light esteem, indeed in very light esteem. If such is the disbelief of science of everyday use, what chance of credit has the obtruser knowledge, and those assertions of power which contradict our mote or ordinary ideas of possibility? Common sense will never, none at all. Common sense will answer none at all. And yet all human conclusions and resolutions upon points which have been considered beyond the possibility of contradiction have been sometimes at fault. The most politic course is not too vigorously to take our stand upon any supposed fixed point of truth, but simply to admit that our knowledge is limited, that absolute truth is alone in the knowledge of God, and that no more truth is vouchsafed to man than he knows how to utilize. Most of his uses, even of his little quantum of truth, being perverted, he must await other states for greater light, and to become a higher creature, should that be his happy destiny. As to certainly, he must await other states for greater light, and to become a higher creature, should that be his happy destiny. As to certainty, in this world there is none, nor can there be any. Whether there is anything outside of man is uncertain. Hume has pointed out that there is no sequence between 1 and 2. Other philosophers have ingeniously detected that our senses are all one, are all none. Man is the picture painted upon external matter, and each external matter is the individuality that surveys the picture. Man is the picture painted upon external matter, and external matter is the individuality that surveys the picture. In the world of physics, colors are tones in other senses, and tones are colors, sevenfold in either case, as the planetary powers and influences are septenary. 777, which in the ideas of the Rosicrucians produce both. End of chapter the 6th. There is what looks like a bin pendant, or circle, or classical 0, extending from either side, is a winged serpent, a serpent with two wings extended in front of itself. Two serpents, each serpent is in possession of two wings. Before chapter the 7th, there is a talisman of the Jaina kings, which is the classical swastika of the National Socialist Workers' Party, former party of Germany, no longer existent due to its magnificent failure and horror that it caused. But the swastika is still the talisman of the Jaina kings. Mythic history of the fleur de lis. The maypole is a phallus. The ribbons depending from the discus or ring through which the maypole pierces should be of the 7 prismatic colors, those of the rainbow or regne bow. According to the Gnostics and their remains, ancient and medieval, a work for the Reverend C.W. King, M.A., published in 1864, Hoor Apollo has preserved a talisman or Gnostic gem in yellow jasper, which presents the engraved figure of a cynocephalus, crowned with a baton erect, adoring the first appearance of the new moon. The phallic worship prevailed at one time all over India. It constitutes, as Mr. Celan asserts, to this day, one of the chief, if not the leading, dogma of the Hindu religion. Incontestable evidence could be adduced to prove this, however strange and impossible it seems. The key of all worship the world over, and highest in esteem in the most highly civilized nations, though it has degenerated into gross and sensual superstition. It was originally intended as the worship of the creative principle in nature. Innumerable curious particulars lie scattered up and down in all the countries of the world. Relating to this worship, mad as it seems, bad as in its grossness it is only in modern times that sensuality and not sublimity has been actively associated with this worship, however. There was a time when the rites connected with it were grand and solemn enough. The general diffusion of these notions regarding the phalli, or the Ioni, and of the sacred mystic suggestions implied in both, as well as the inflections and design of these unlikely repulsive figures for serious worship, proved these there was something very extraordinary and quite beyond belief to the moderns in the origin of them. The religion of the Phallos and its twin emblem is to be traced all over the East. It prevailed not only among the Hindus, Assyrians, Babylonians, Mexicans, Etruscans, Greeks, and Romans in ancient times, but it still forms an integral part of the worship of India, Tibet, China, Siam, Japan, and Africa. We cannot therefore afford to ignore this grand scheme of ritual when we discover it to be a religion so widely spread and reappearing so unexpectedly, not only in the countries with which we are contemporaneously acquainted, but also in those old countries of which we in reality know very little, are nothing at all. For all history reads doubtfully, being written for popular purposes. In the temple Heron of Nikolai, there is an account of the Gnostic gem or talisman, which represents a cynocephalus with a lunar disc on its head, standing in the act of adoration, with spectrum displayed, before a column engraved with letters and supporting a triangle. This latter architectural figure is in fact an obelisk. All the Egyptian obelisks were phalli. The triangle symbolizes one of the pillars of Hermes. The cynocephalus was sacred to him. The pillars of Hermes have been Judaized into Solomon's Jachin and Boaz. Who says Hertz in regard to Masonic insignia? We will explain further later in our book of these interesting sexual images set up for adoration so strangely, and from the meaning of which we foolishly but determinately avert. We now propose to deduce a very original and a very elaborate genealogy or descent of the famous arms of France, the fleur-de-lis, Lucifera, Lysis, Lucis, Lucius, Bess, Scarabs, Scarabis, or imperial bees of Charlemagne, and of Napoleon I and Napoleon III, from a very extraordinary, and we will, in the fullest assurance, add the most unexpected point of view. The real beginning of these inexpressibly sublime arms, of this badge, although in itself and apart from its purpose, it is the most refined, but mysteriously grand in the world, contradictory as it may seem, is also the most ignoble. It has been the crux of the antiquaries and of the heralds for centuries. We would rather be excused the mentioning of the peculiar item, which has thus been held up to the highest honor herodically throughout the world. It will be sufficient to say that mystically, in its theological, Gnostic allusion, it is the grandest device and most stupendous hint that armory ever saw. And those who are qualified to apprehend our hidden meaning will perhaps read correctly and perceive our end by the time that they have terminated the strange section of our history of Rosicrucianism, for to it refers particularly. Scarabei, Lucifera, light-bringers, Luce, fleur-de-lis, lily, Luthia, Lucy, lux, lu plus x, lu plus sky. The luke is the old-fashioned name for the pike, or jack, a fish famous for the profuse generation of a certain insect, as some fishermen know very well. This, once incredible as it may seem, formed an object of worship, for the sake of the inexpressibly sublime things which it symbolized. Although so mean in itself, and although so far off, this implied the beginning of all sublunary things. The bees of Charlemagne, the bees of the empire in France, are scarabs, or figures of the same affinity as the Bourbon lilies. They deduce from a common ancestor. Now, the color heraldic on which they are always emblazoned is azure, or blue, which is the color of the sea, which is salt. In an anagram, it may be expressed as C, the letter C. Following on this allusion, we may say that vendre saint riz is a very ancient French barbarous expletive or oath. Literally, which in the occult sense is always obscurely, it is the sacred blue or gray womb, which is absurd. Now, the reference and the meaning of this we will confidently commit to the penetration of those among our readers who can felicitously privately surmise it, and also the apparently circuitous deductions which are yet to come to be made by us. Blue is the color of the Virgin Maria. Maria, Mary, mare, mar, mam, ma'am, means the bitterness or the saltness of the sea. Blue is expressive of the Hellenic, Isidian, Ionian, Phonian, Phony Indian, F-O-N-I, watery, female, and moon-like principle in the universal theogony. It runs through all the mythologies. The lady bird or lady cow, there is no resemblance between a bird and a cow. It may be remarked in passant, except in this strangely occult, almost ridiculous affinity. And the lady bird or lady cow, and the rustic rhyme among the children concerning it may be here remembered. Lady bird, fly away home. Your house is on fire, your children at home. Such may be heard in all parts of England when a lady bird is seen by the children. Myths are inextricably embodied, like specks in straws and flies in amber, amidst the sayings and rhymes of the common people in all countries, and they are there preserved for many generations, reappearing to recognition after the lapse sometimes of centuries. Now, how do we explain and re-render the above rude couplet? The lady bird is the Virgin Maria, Isis, the mother and producer of nature. The house is the ecliptic, and it is figuratively on fire, or of fire, in the path of the sun. And the children at home are the months produced in the house of the sun, or the solar year, or the signs of the zodiac, which were originally 10, not 12, each sign answering to one of the letters of the primeval alphabet, which were number and 10. There's an asterisk with a different poem, and I'll read that. It relates again. The lady bird is the Virgin Maria, Isis, the mother and producer of nature. The house is the ecliptic. It is figuratively on fire, or of fire, in the path of the sun. And the children at home are the months produced in the house of the sun, or the solar year, or the signs of the zodiac, which were originally 10 and not 12. Lady cow, fly away home. Thy house is on fire, thy children are flown, all but a little one, under a stone. Fly thee home, lady cow, ere it be gone. The lady bird or cow is the Virgin Mary, the little one, under the stone, or the mystic human possibility, is the infant Savior, born in the mysterious month of propitiation, or the mystical, astrological, and astronomical escaped month of the zodiac, and the stone is the philosopher's stone. Each sign answering to one of the letters of the primeval alphabet, which were in number 10. Thus we read the lines run: lady bird, columba or dove, fly away home. Your home is a fire, your children are 10. The name of the flying insect, called in England ladybird, is bête à Dieu in French, which means God creature or God's creature. The Napoleonic green is the mythic green of Venus. The emerald is the smaragdus or smaragd. The name of the insect Barnaby. The smaragd is the emerald tablet. The name of the insect is Barnaby. Barnaby, burning firefly, whose house is of fire, whose children are 10, is red gefer or sulfur, roter gefer, sonnen gefer, unser Frauen Golein in Germany. It is sun gefer or sun chafer or sun chaser. Our Lady's little cow, Isis or eel or ow or ow in English. The children tin or tin, Chinese, is fire in some languages, man in others, are the earliest 10 signs in the zodiacal heavens, each sign with its 10 decans or decumens or lenders of hosts. They are also astronomically called stalls or stables. We may here refer to Porphyry, Hor Apollo, or chieflets or chislets, Gnostic gems. The speckled beetle was flung into hot water to avert storms. Pliny, Natural History, Book 37, Chapter 10. Chapter Chi. Chi. The antiquary Pycnorius has a beetle crowned with the sun and encircled with the serpent. Among the Gnostic illustrations published by Abraham, Gorlaeus is that of a talisman of the more abstruse Gnostics, an onyx carved with a beetle which threatens to gnaw at a thunderbolt. An onyx carved with a beetle which threatens to gnaw at a thunderbolt. See Notes and Queries, B. Mythology. The lilies are said not to have appeared in the French arms until the time of Philip Augustus. See Montfaucon, Monuments de la Monarchie Française, Paris, 1729. Also, Jean-Jacques Chifflet, Annotations de Childere, 1655. See also Notes and Queries, 1856, London, 2nd series, for some learned papers on the fleur-de-lis. In the early armorial bearings of the Frankish kings, the lilies are represented as insects, seated, or spotted on the blue field. These are in their origin the scarabaei of the Orientals. They were dignified by the Egyptians as emblems of the enlightened. If the reader examines carefully the sculpture in the British Museum representing the Mithraic sacrifice of the bull with its mystic accompaniments, number 14, Grand Central Saloon, he will perceive the scarabaeus, or crab, playing a peculiar part in the particulars of the grand rite, so strangely typified and also so remotely. The motto placed under the lilies, which are the arms of France, runs as follows: Lilia non laborant nique nit. This is also, as all know, the legend or motto accompanying the royal order of knighthood, denominated that of Saint Esprit in France. We are immediately now recalled to those exceedingly obscure but very significant words of our Savior, which have always seemed very erroneously interpreted on account of their obvious contradiction. Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow, they toil not, nor do they spin. The full quotation is the following: Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you that even Solomon, here steps in some of the lore of the Masonic order, in all his glory was not arrayed, or exalted or dignified as it is more correctly rendered out of the original, like one of these. St. Matthew 6:28. Now, in regard to this part of the text, what does the judicious speculator think of the following Rosicrucian gloss or explanation? Lilia non laborant, like bees, neque nint, neither do they spin, like spiders. None of the lices, as we shall elect to call them. They toil not like bees, scarabe, neither do they spin like spiders, arachnide. To be wise is to be enlightened. Lux is the Logos, by whom all things were made, and the Logos is Rosit. Ra, sin, ta, Aresh, sin, Tov, and equals in gematria 600, and lux makes lucis, then lx equals 666. Again, L equals 50, wow or Vov equals 6, Sheen equals 300, Yod, Sheen, or S, Turkish, equals 300, Yod, or I, equals 10, Eel, Sheen, again Turkish S, equals 300, all equals 666. The fleur de lis is the lotus, water rose. The flowers sacred to the lux are the sul, are the sun. The oriflamme, the flame of fire, or fire of gold, was the earliest standard of France. It was afterwards called oriflamme, or oriflamme. It was the sacred flag of France, and its color was red, the heraldic, or Rosicrucian. Its color was red, the heraldic, or Rosicrucian red, signifying gold. The three lotuses, or lices, were the coat of arms emblems of Trimurti, the three persons of the triple generative power, or of the sun, or lux. Sin, lamb, Sli, Shiloh, is probably Sil, 360 in gematria, or Chi, 600, or Lambda, 50, equals, 50 equals Eo, or 10, Vov, Yod equals 10, Vov equals 6, all going to 666. The author may or may not get here soon enough, but gematria is very important, as from manifestations if you imagine a giant circle with concentric circles in between, broken up, as it were, into wedges or radian wedges, 28 of them. At every level of the circle going downward toward the center, there is a manifestation. The very top of the manifestation, there is the decans, or beyond that, and then there are the 12 zodiacal signs. The decans are the 36 divisions that predate the 12 zodiacal signs and used to make the Egyptian year, 360 days or 36 10-day decans. And then beneath that, there is the name of, in the old Egyptian system, one of the 9 gods, or the realm of the gods. And then on it became down in the modern tradition to the Hebraic prophets. And beneath that, a word, and on until you get to the 28 letters, at least of the Arabic or English alphabet. And beyond that, you have the numbers. And after the numbers, you have the divine center. In Arabic, Allah. In the Taoist tradition, the Tao itself, and others going on. So the reason why you break down to numbers is to get closer and closer to the one, the Tao, the singularity. And you go away from them toward the decans to be away from them into manifestation. If you know what a torus is, or a tesseract, in a tesseract, this would just be free-flowing. 666, 600, 66, as found in the book of Revelation, for some 616, 616. 6 is the number of union. 66 is the number of Allah in Arabic, or the Islamic and Christian name of the Godhead. And 6 is the number of unity. So this is considered in manifestation. So 666 is the number of complete manifested divine unity. And for a man is considered perfection. And so in the tradition of the Arabs, this is called the insan kamil. It is the perfect or perfected man, or mature man, who is perfect, whether or not he is good or evil. So continuing, this is Silo or Silo. I have no doubt it was the invocation in the Psalms called Salah, perfection. So at the end, he's arguing of every psalm that says Salah, it was called perfect, likely because it was a Psalm of David. Thus asserts the learned and judicious Godfrey Higgins. The Holy Church of Rome herself doth compare the incomprehensible generation of the Son of Man from his Father, together with his birth out of the pure and undefiled Virgin Marie, unto the bees, which were in very deed a great blasphemy, if the bees were not of so great valor and virtue, value and dignity, beehive of the Romish Church. Hone's Ancient Mysteries Described, page 283. In the second edition of Nineveh and its Palaces by Bonomi, London, Ingram, 1853, page 138, the headdress of the divinity, Ilus, is an egg-shaped cap terminating at the top in a fleur-de-lis. At page 149, the dagon of Scripture has the same. At page 201, figure 98, the same ornament appears at page 202, figure 99. A bearded figure has the usual fleur-de-lis. In the same page, the tiaras of 2 bearded figures are surmounted with fleur-de-lis. At page 332, figure 1 At page 332, figure 211, the Assyrian helmet is surmounted by a fleur-de-lis. At page 338, figure 217, the headdress of the figure in the Assyrian standard has a fleur-de-lis. At page 340, figure 245, the bronze resembles a fleur-de-lis. At page 350, figure 254, an important number, an Egyptian example of the god Nilus, as on the thrones of Pharaoh Niku, exhibits the fleur-de-lis. Vert are green and azure are blue. Feminine tinctures are the colors on which, respectively, the golden bees or the silver lyses are emblazoned. The Egyptian scarabæi are frequently cut in stone, generally in green-colored basalt, or verdentique. Some have hieroglyphics on them, which are more rare. Others are quite plain. In the tombs of Thebes, Belzoni found scarabæi with human heads. There is hardly any symbolical figure which recurs so often in Egyptian sculpture or painting as the scarabus, or beetle, and perhaps scarcely any one which it is so difficult to explain. He is often represented with a ball between his forelegs, which some take for a symbol of the world, or the sun. He may be an emblem of fertility. The crab on the Dendera zodiac is by some supposed to be a beetle, Egyptian antiquities. It is for some of the preceding reasons that one of the mystic names of Lucifer, or the devil, is the Lord of Flies, for which strange appellation all antiquaries and other learned decipherers have found it impossible to account. Of the figure of the fleur-de-lis, fleur-de-lis, or flower de luce, the following may be remarked. On its sublime abstract side, it is the symbol of the mighty, self-producing, self-begetting, generative power deified in many myths. We may make a question, in the lower sense, in this regard of the word loose, namely wanton, and the word lek, leche, and lecher, and so on. Consider also, in the solemn and terrible sense, the name krom lek, or crown, or arched entry, or gate, or arsh, walima, of death. The juridical stones were generally called cromlich when placed in groups of two, with a coping or capstone over, similarly to the form of the Greek letter pi, which was imitated from that temple of stones which we call cromlech. The whole forming of a capital, chapter, chapitre, chapel, cancel, and chancel, hence our word, and the sublime judicial office of chancellor and chancery. The juridical stones were generally called cromlechs when placed in groups of two, with a coping or capstone over, similarly to the form of the Greek letter pi, which was imitated from the temples of stones which we call cromlech. Cromlechs were the altars of the Druids, and were so called from a Hebrew word signifying to bow or bow. There is a Druidic temple at Toulouse, in France, exhibiting many of these curious Druidical stones. There is a large flat stone, 10 feet long, 6 feet wide, 1 foot thick at St. David's, Pembrokeshire. It is called in Cymric Lech Legar, the speaking stone. We may speculate upon the word lich, lech in this connection, and the terms Lichgate and Lechgate, as also the name of Lichfield. There is a porch or gateway, mostly to the entrance of old-fashioned churchyards, which is called the Lich Porch, or Lich Porch. Lug, or lit, is a word in the Danish signifying the same as like in Dutch and lich in the German. Thus comes the word Lichgate. Lich is the Anglo-Saxon. Lich in the Anglo-Saxon means a dead body. See Notes and Queries, Volume 2, page 4. The Lichgates were as a sort of triumphal arch, profile, placed before the church as the outwork called the propylon, or propylaeum, was advanced before the Egyptian and the Grecian temples. They are found in the form of separate arches before the gates even of Chinese cities, and they are there generally called triumphal arches. Arc de Triomphe. Profile is a name of Hecate. Dis Chronos are the pi to which sinister deity, the propylon, or propylaeum, as also properly the Lynch Gate, or the Lich Gate, is dedicated. Hence its ominous import, pro, or before, the pylon or passage. Every Egyptian temple has a propylon. The pyramid also in Nubia has one. We refer to the ground plans of the temples of Dendera, Upper Egypt, the temple of Luxor, Thebes, the temple of Edfu, Upper Egypt, the temple of Karnak, or Karnak, Thebes. Colonial, afterwards General, Colonel, afterwards General Valency, in the 4th volume, page 80 of his General Works, cited in the Celtic Druids, page 223, a valuable book by Godfrey Higgins, says, in Cornwall they call it, in essence, the rocking stone, the Logan stone. Barlasse, in his History of Cornish Antiquities, declares that he does not understand the meaning of this term Logan, as applied to the Druidical stones. Had Dr. Barlasse been acquainted with the Irish manuscript, significantly adds Colonel Valency, he would have found that the Druidical oracular stone called Logan, which yet retains its name in Cornwall, is the Irish Lugún, or stone into which the Druids pretended that the Luga, or divine essence, descended when they consulted it as an oracle. Luga in Celtic is the same as Logos in Greek. Both terms mean the Logos, word, or the Holy Ghost. Samphoniathan, the Phoenician, says that Uranus contrived in Boetulia stones that moved as having life. Stukeles Aburi, page 97, may be here referred to for further proofs of the mystic origin of these stones, and also the Celtic Druids of Godfrey Higgins. in contradiction to those who would infer that these poised stones simply mark burial places or foolish conclusions of shallow and incompetent antiquaries. The Basiledons were called by the Orthodox docete or illusionists. The deity of the Gnostics was called Abraxas in Latin and Abraxax in Greek. Their last state or condition for rescued sensitive entities, as they termed souls, their last state or condition for rescued sensitive entities, as they termed souls, was the pleroma, or fullness of light. This agrees precisely with the doctrines of the Buddhists, or Buddhists. The regulating, presiding genius was the Pantheos. The Pythagorean record quoted by Porphyry, Vit Pythag, states that the numerals of Pythagoras were hieroglyphical symbols by means whereof he explained ideas concerning the nature of things. That these symbols were 10 in number, the 10 original signs of the zodiac, and the 10 letters of the primeval alphabet, appears from Aristotle. Metaphysics 7:7. Some philosophers hold, he says, that ideas and numbers are of the same nature, and amount to 10 in all. See the Gnostics and their remains, page 229. But to return to the arms of France, which are the fleur-de-lis, and to the small representative creature, sublime enough, as the farthest off symbol which they are imagined in their greatness to indicate, a Bible presented to Charles II, Anno Domini 869, has a miniature of this monarch on his court. His throne is terminated with 3 flowers of the form of fleur-de-lis, sans pied. On his head is a crown fermé à fleurins d'or, relevé et recourbé de une manière singulière. Another miniature in the Book of Prayers shows him on a throne surmounted by a sort of fleur-de-lis sans pied. His crown is of fleur gomme de lis, and the robe is fastened with a rose. Deux sortant trois pistils in forme de fleur-de-lis. His scepter terminates in a fleur-de-lis. Notes and queries. Sylvanus Morgan, an old-fashioned herald abounding in suggestive disclosures, has the following. Sir William Wise, having lent to the King Henry VIII his signet to seal a letter, who having powdered, simbed, or spotted, ermites, they were emets, ants, engraved in the seal, the King paused and looked thereat, considering. We may here query whether the field of the coat of arms of Sir William Wise was not ermine, for several of the families of Wise bear this fur. And it is not unlike that he did so also. Why, how now, Wise, quoth the King, what hast thou liced here? Why, how now, Wise, quoth the King, what hast thou liced here? On, if it like your majesty. Quoth Sir William, a louse is a rich coat, but by giving the louse I part arms with the French king, in that he giveth the fleur de lis, or the fleur de lys. Whereat the king heartily laughed, to hear how prettily so biting a taunt, namely proceeding from a prince, was so suddenly turned to a plaisant écosite. Lycée is the word for school. in French and often used in Turkish similarly. Lice are critters that get in your hair. Stanahert's History of Ireland and Holinshed's Chronology, Nares thinks that Shakespeare, who is known to have been a reader of Holinshed, took his conceit of the white louses, which do become an old coat well, in the Merry Wives of Windsor, from this. See Heroic Anomalies, Volume 1, page 204, also anecdote. Nares thinks that Shakespeare, who is known to have been a reader of Holinshed, took his conceit of the white louses, which do become an old coat well, in the Merry Wives of Windsor, from this anecdote. See Heraldic Anomalies, Volume 1, page 204, also Lower's Curiosities of Heraldry, page 82, 1845. It may here be mentioned that the mark signifying the royal property, as it is used in France, similarly to the token or symbol or brand denoting the royal domain, the property, or the sign upon royal chattels, the broad arrow, as used in England, is the lis of the fleur-de-lis. The mark by which criminals are branded in France is the lis fleur-de-lis. The English broad arrow, the mark or sign of royal property, is variously depicted similarly to the following marks. Figure 1, a point from which 3 black arrows emit, each upward but not overlapping. Figure 2, a point in which 3 flower stems emit, topped by triform or triangles, again not overlapping, very similar to a Hebrew sheen. Figure 3, a line under which are 3 arrows, similar to figure 2. Figure 4, another line where 3 triforms meet at a point extending downward. Figure 5, 3 triforms, one with its base facing left, the other with its base facing right, and one with its base facing downward, very similar to a jack-o'-lantern without a mouth. These are the 3 knells of the Passion. In figures 1 and 2, they are unmistakably so, with the points downward. Figures 3 and 4 have the significant horizontal mark, which, in the first centuries of Christianity, stood for the second, with feminine meanings, person of the Trinity. But the points of the spikes, spicae or thorns, are gathered upwards in the center. In figure 5, there are still the 3 nails, but a suggestive similarity to be remarked in this figure is a disposition resembling the crux ansata, an incessant symbol always reappearing in Egyptian sculptures and hieroglyphics. There is also a likeness of the mysterious letter tau. The whole first chapter of Genesis is said to be contained in this letter emblem, this magnificent, all-including tau. 3 bent spikes or nails are unmistakably the same symbol that Belus often holds in his extended hand on the Babylonian cylinders, afterwards discovered by the Jewish Kabbalists in the points of the letter Shin, and by the medieval mystics in the 3 nails of the cross. The Gnostics and their remains Ancient and Medieval, page 208. This figure, which is clearly a nail, has also characteristics which will be remarked in its upper portion, which suggests a likeness to the obelisk, pin, spike, upright, or phallus. The Hebrew letter shin, or sin, counts for 300 in the Hebraic numeration. Each spica, or spike, may be taken to signify 100, or 10 tens. We have strong hints here of the origin of the decimal system, which reigns through the universal laws of computation, with as a natural substratum, basis, or principle. The powerful symbol also is full of secret important meaning. It will be remarked as the symbol or figure assigned in the formal zodiacs of all countries, whether original zodiacs or whether produced in figure imitations by recognizing tradition. The marks are symbols of the zodiacal signs. Virgo, Scorpio are closely similar to each other with certain differences, which we recommend to the judicious consideration of close and experienced observers. And then it says, "Behold, I show you a sign." Virgo, the sign for Virgo, the sign for Libra, and Scorpio in a row together should be compared that way. Virgo, Libra, Scorpio. Almost to say that Virgo equals Scorpio, but who knows. The woman conqueror leading the dragon, the restored world, or captivity, captive. Figure 8, a Roman numeral 1, lines leading to the moon, a serpent in the shape of an S, and a checkerboard next to a blank sheet of paper, also called the Templar banner, the famous sint. Figure 9 is a way of telling the new moon differently than we normally see in the figures. Eye, serpent, checkered banner, moon. Figure 8 is the symbol or hook of Saturn, the color of whom is the heraldic configuration in sable, or black, divided parti per pale, with the opening light of the first crescent moon on the post-diluvian world. The shining star as the harbinger in the moon's embrace, meaning the divine post-diluvian remission and reconciliation. Thus the sublime Mohammedan mythic device of cognizance, the crescent of the new moon lying on her back, and the shining star in this display. Figure 9 is the same grandly mystic banner, denominated sint, Beausent, revealing a whole occult theosophy to the initiate, which the leaders of the Templars undoubtedly were. The difference between two figures, figure 8 and figure 9, is that the fly of the ensign marked figure 9 is bifurcated or cloven in the lighted part, we subjoin the representation of the wondrous banner of the poor soldiers of the temple, as depicted abundantly on the spandrel of the arches of the temple church. Bo Shan, figure 10, says around a banner. Bo Selon, says figure 11. Von Hammer's Mystery of Baphomet Revealed contains much suggestive matter relative to these mysterious supposed dreadful Templars. The Parisian Templiers assert that there is a connection between the recent Nishki letter and the Kufic characters, and that the origin of the secrets of the Order of the Temple is contemporary with the prevalence of the latter alphabet. We here refer to the work entitled Mysterium Baphometis Revelationum Seu Fratres Militia Temple qua nostid et quidem Ophiani Apostasici Idololatris et quidem impuritatis convicti per ipsa iorum monementa, published in the Mines de Orient, Volume 6. This treatise is illustrated with numerous admirably executed copper plates of magical statuettes, architectural ornaments, mystical inscriptions, vases, and coins. Amidst these there is a bearded yet female figure, Mette, Magna, or Maxima, whom von Hammer, following Theodosius and others, makes the same as the Sophia of the Orphites. Some particulars referring to these subjects are contained in the Gnostics and their remains, ancient and medieval, although there is an evident betraying total ignorance on the part of the author. Throughout his book, as to the purpose, meaning, and reality of the whole of these remote and mysterious subjects, to which he is, however, blindly constantly referring, without the merit of even feeling his way, it is well known that the preservation of Gnostic symbols by Freemasons was, and remains so to this day, exceedingly sedulous. We will terminate this part of our long dissertation, which commenced with the explanation of the descent or the genealogy or the generation of the famous fleur-de-lis of France, the noblest and sublimest symbol in its occult or mysterious meaning which the monarch's son ever saw displayed to it, inexpressibly mean and repellent as the lis seems. We will finish, we say thus far, by commenting in a very original and unexpected but strictly corroborative manner upon some words of Shakespeare which have hitherto been passed wholly without remark or explanation. We may premise by recalling that the luce is a pike, pick, or jack. Jack, yak, B and I are complementary in this mythic sense. Bak, Bacche, Bacchus. Shakespeare's well-known lampoon, or satirical ballad upon the name of Lucy, may be cited as illustrative proof of this side of the subject. Lucy is lousy, as some folk miscall it. The zodiacal sign for February is the fishes. Now the observances of St. Valentine's Day, which point to courtship and to sexual love, or to loving invitation, bear direct reference to the fishes in a certain sense. the arms of the Lucies as they are at present to be seen, and where we not long since saw them, beautifully restored upon the great entrance gates of Charlecote Hall, are placed near Stratford upon Avon, our 3 luces are pikes, Orient, Argent. The dozen white luces are observed upon with intense family pride by shallow Lucy in the Merry Wives of Windsor. Shallow, it is an old coat, Evans. The dozen white louses do become an old coat well. The significant part of the passage follows to this effect, though deeply hidden in the sly art of our knowing but reticent Shakespeare. It agrees well, passant. We would here read passine everywhere, which makes clear sense. It is a familiar beast to man, and signifies love, the generative act. Merry Wives of Windsor, Act 1, Scene 1. We commend the above history of the fleur-de-lis to the thoughtful attention of our reader, because he will find under it the whole explanation of the arms of France. And yet, although the above is all essentially feminine, this is the country that imported amidst its Frankish or Saxon progenitors Clodio the long-haired to the example, who first passed the Rhine and brought his female ultramarine to supersede and replace in blazon the martial manly carmine Argules of the Gauls. This is the country that adopted and maintained la loi salique. The image at the end of chapter the 7th is of a man holding a very tall crook. The man is 6 feet tall. He has the crook would be about 8 feet tall, bending at the 7th foot. The man stands upright with a hat on, and around him is an ermine, but the ermine seems to be a slaughtered dragon that he wears, possibly from warmth or style, and leading from behind him is a duck-faced serpent. He walks toward the left, 1 foot in front of the other, 1 foot lifted high, seeming his left foot behind and his right foot front, and the staff or crook very close to the forward-facing right foot. It is squared, but has 8 identifiable sides, maybe 7. Chapter the 8th begins with the sign of the planet Venus.